You there?
Yes, I'm
Yes.
here. Hi.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Sandhya, as it says, is from Shock Meats and is joining us quite late tonight, I think, Sandhya, for you, from
Yeah.
Singapore. Shock Meats is the world's first, if I'm right, crustacean cultured meat. And in fact, we would have heard about Shock Meats yesterday. It was used as an example of there's been a lot of talk about alternative proteins and cultured meat. So, Sandhya, you were mentioned in a presentation yesterday as really groundbreaking in what you're doing. What we will do today is ask Sandhya perhaps some questions. And it's useful to know her background because she's a scientist, and if I'm right, a cell, I think biologist. Is that right? Is that the right? But also a serial entrepreneur. So she brings two sides here to the stage, and it'll be great, really, to hear from you, Sandhya. And I think if I could start with what inspired you to find and launch Shock Meats, and really what is, if you could tell us a little bit about what you do and your plans for the future. So over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here and pleasure to be calling in from Singapore. It's a beautiful evening here. So, yes, I am actually a stem cell scientist by training. I used to be a typical scientist for a very long time and then decided that I want to put my science skills into something that I love, which is environment and animals, and decided to start a cultivated meat company in 2018, which is Shiok Meats. So Shiok actually means delicious or fantastic in Singapore Malay slang, and hence the name for the company. And it wasn't just born overnight. As you mentioned, I am a serial entrepreneur. My first startup was actually a science news website. And that's when I came across Dr. Mark Post putting up the first cultivated hamburger in the Netherlands and in London in 2014. 2013, 2014. I covered that news. I sort of interviewed a couple of entrepreneurs around that sphere and got super obsessed with the industry and eventually decided in 2018 to start my own company. So what we do at Shiok Meats is, yes, we are essentially the world's first cultivated or cultured crustacean or shellfish company. So we work predominantly on shrimp, crab, lobster, and crayfish. But as of last year, we actually acquired another startup in Singapore called Gaia Foods, and we do beef and pork, which is red meat as well right now. So the ultimate vision for the company is to be a global leader in cultivated meat and seafood with the mission to put delicious, nutritious, and affordable food on everybody's plates that's sustainable. But I come in with a lot of a worldly view of how the industry can work together rather than, there is no competition here. We are looking at 10 billion in population. We are looking at a multi-trillion dollar industry. We all need to work together, be it urban farming, be it plant-based, be it cell-based, be it insect-based. All of us need to come together because that's how many mouths we'll have to feed, and all the different sources of protein need to come together. So I also started a non-profit organization called the APAC Society for Cellular Agriculture. We're also represented at COP27, in fact. And the idea with the society, we have about 14 APAC cellular agriculture companies coming together, and we all want to work on regulatory harmonization, nomenclature, consumer education, and sort of bringing the industry to the mass scale that it needs to be in the future.
That's really useful because, Sandhya, we've heard about that no single solution is the answer. So coming together on these solutions is really important across industries. The other area we've heard is about small scale farmers. And I wonder, this partly is a question about the misconceptions perhaps around cultured meat. And there has been, as we've gone through the 2 weeks of COP, some reservations around these new technologies, and then also the role of small scale farmers, traditional farmers, particularly in Africa and the global south. And I just would like you to talk a little bit about that and how you perhaps trying to bridge over to, in your case, the fisheries and what work you're doing around that.
I'm glad you asked that question, honestly, because I don't think any one of us here, specifically us, we are not here to put anybody out of business. In fact, the idea is how can we empower the farmers or the food production companies or the people who go and fish for seafood in the ocean? How can we empower them with a better technology? Honestly, they are the experts in selling the product to consumers. They are the distributors. They know how to sell, what to sell. We here are the technology people. We are innovators. We're into technology. And from day one, Shiok Meats has always said that we will try to empower these farmers. Yes, it's not happening overnight, but we also need to understand cultivated meat is also not going to go mass scale overnight. So it has to be a displacement of traditional ways of producing seafood or meats with a newer technology that we are bringing in. And the idea is how can we integrate this? So one of the sort of initiatives that I'm a part of with Ira van Nielen from Netherlands, she's a big advocate of cultivated meat and the founder of Kind Earth Tech. And what we are doing is trying to work with the Dutch farmers to put a bioreactor in their existing farm. So we're not telling them to shut their meat business or stop anything that they're doing. But as proof of concept, what we're telling them is, can we put a bioreactor in your farm? And we just want to see if this works. And if it's scalable, you can move your business model over time and over a few decades, not just overnight or over a few years.
Oh, that is really good to hear, because that's been the narrative on the stage here at the Food Systems Pavilion. So really good to hear that. So then that brings me to the next step, which is we are at a COP, and you are, I think, producing something that is obviously climate resilient and potentially really contributes to food security. Can you tell us a little bit more about the model and how you see that contributing to addressing climate change?
For sure. I mean, so, one of the things, I get this question a lot. And, in my mind, it's always going on, is the cultivated meat industry truly sustainable? Even I question that, because all of us are not at mass scale production yet. The industry is 6 to 8 years old. We are pretty young. We're all projecting numbers of how much land use we'll have, how much water use and energy, and so on. Of course, the Good Food Institute has done an extensive study on this and showed that we will use 4x less land, we'll use 8x less water, and so on, right? But one of the key things, like as of today, what I can definitely tell you how we are, adapting, being a part of climate change and being a part of how do we take care of energy and land and water uses, just these numbers. One shrimp takes 8 to 12 months to grow into an adult in a farm. A lobster takes 3 to 5 years. A crab takes 1 to 2 years. In cultivated technology, we can do all of that in 6 weeks, be it lobster, shrimp, or crab. We're not growing the entire animal. If you want a kilogram of shrimp, it takes you 8 months. A kilogram of shrimp here takes 6 weeks. The same, you want 1,000 tons of shrimp in cultivated, it still takes you 6 weeks. You just need more infrastructure and more bioreactors. Just by the sheer cut of the time taken to grow these meats and seafood, that is contributing to climate change, lesser energy, lesser resources, lesser land eventually.
Thanks. Those are incredible numbers. So then the next question is really, there's another theme of scaling all these fantastic solutions. How do we scale them? So what do you see is the journey to mainstreaming and scaling and to commercialization in your case? But where do you see that journey, both in timing and the roadblocks you might see that you need to overcome?
Very relevant question. So here with the cultivated industry, we have taken a very niche, expensive technology from biomedical, pharmaceutical, healthcare, and put it into a very commoditized, inexpensive mass production industry called food. So we do have to understand that we have to democratize this. It's not going to be one company that wins it all. Honestly, I just did math in my head or did it on an Excel sheet, and I figured out that if every cultivated meat company needs to set up manufacturing tomorrow to reach mass scale, first of all, we don't have enough bioreactors. Even if we need to hit 10% of the current meat and seafood industry, each company will need to raise a minimum $1 billion each. And that's just numbers that is not practical. So one of the strong, opinions I have and what I advocate for is this needs to be more democratized and decentralized, where the governments come in and step in for infrastructure, where philanthropists come in, PE, VC, the startups, the food companies, all of them come in. So how I'm proving that this business model will work is one of the things that Shiok Meats is extremely passionate about is our technology. We know our technology is good. We are not food producers, we are not distributors. So the idea is how can we get the large food companies initially to start using our technology? So we play more of a licensing model rather than us doing manufacturing from scale. But even to reach that licensing model, we do need to show that this technology works at a certain scale. It can't work in the grams and the few kilograms. It has to work at least, I need to prove that you invest X amount of money in infrastructure, you're able to produce, let's say, 1 ton of meat with this cost in a month, in a week, whatever it is. And once you have that proof of concept, larger food companies that are already investing in this industry will definitely want a license. That's the only way we can feed the 10 billion people and actually say that we are 5%, 10% of the meat and seafood industry.
Yeah, so actually, Aleph Farms was bringing up exactly this point, and I know you've been speaking to Aleph Farms about decentralization and how we get to scale. So really interesting to hear that from you. Just broadening out a little bit now, as a serial entrepreneur, what do you feel the role of entrepreneurs, particularly, but also business, in really pushing some of these solutions out? I'd love to hear from you from a personal perspective as an entrepreneur.
What I've noticed is a lot of the things have to be said over and over and over again in platforms like this, in events. It is more, I said this at a recent event as well, but a lot of the things that we think are common sense and that are black and white need to be repeated over and over again. It's not the complex things, it's actually the simple things that say the simple idea of democratizing, mass scale production of cultivated meat. Aleph and I, we speak together. We're part of the APAC Society as well. And it comes from the vision that we want to make this industry at scale. All food companies eventually are profitable. We can't look at profit from day one with this technology. We have to look at making it mass scale. Eventually, we'll become profitable. We'll earn the money back to the investors, to the governments, whatever is required, because people will eat and we need to eat.
Good. So then now again to COP, what are your expectations from it? You've talked about being at events like this, but looking at COP perhaps from the outside, and you say you've also been contacts here on the ground. But what are your expectations from a COP, and what would you like to see coming from it?
Compared to last year's COP and this year's COP, I'm glad that at least one company showcased their cultivated meat product, Eat Just or Good Meat, at the COP27. I think that's a big, big, big win for the industry. This morning, FDA in the US has approved a chicken product by Upside Foods for safety and so on, and that's another big win. So right now we have Singapore and US, two countries that are looking at these products. I think all of this has happened during the weeks of COP27, but there's a lot of talk, and I feel the execution and the action is slower. So I hope that comes out of this COP, and by COP28 we have more companies showcasing alternative proteins and complementary proteins that are being produced by sustainable technologies. And one of my personal pleas of sort is such large events shouldn't be even serving meat and seafood. That's one easily avoidable thing that can be done. Mass serving of meat and seafood to these consumers there. But yeah, eventually the idea is, let's see how we can make that transition.
Yeah, Sandhya, good point on the meat at events and the food served here. I think it's a fight that the Food Systems Pavilion has taken on. It's difficult because it's a difficult environment for that, but also focusing on nutrition. I think you talked about that, and that's really important. So I want to give the last word to you. Anything that we haven't covered that you feel, one, you want to get across to COP, but also just last word, anything that you would want to add about what you are trying to achieve?
I'm just going to repeat that we all need to work together. It's not going to be one source of protein or one source of food for the world. It's all going to be all of us coming together. And I have a personal sort of an ambition to make sure that all the industries start working together. So I just hope whoever is listening, whoever is watching, whoever's at COP27 or any event or running any food company or sustainable company, please work together and we can make this happen.
Yeah, and I'd like to echo that, Sandhya. We've spoken before. A lot of these organizations, whether it be vertical farming, cultured meats, all working together, the agri-tech industry, to really try and come together for sustainability, but also to scale impact. So, and next step, I think, is working with farmers directly. You've talked about that. Really important next step for us. But thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Methane is a greenhouse gas that causes climate change.